Today we are making a creamy feta pasta bake. Now, this was a very popular dish in maybe 2020, 2021, but I didn't make it for the first time until this year, maybe the end of last year. And there are a ton of different varieties and takes on the recipe that you can try. Here is mine. So I will leave the recipe that I'm working off of linked down below. But in the meantime, we're going to get out an oven-safe dish. Usually you can use a 9x13. I'm using my Dutch oven. It might be like a 4-quart. So my oven is preheating to 400 degrees, and to my Dutch oven or your baking dish, I'm going to add 2 pints of grape or cherry tomatoes, rinsed, washed, whatever. Pick out any stems that are in there, any ones that may have gotten a little shriveled or moldy. Hopefully there are none of those. Don't mind my massive tin of olive oil. It's cheaper per ounce and I knew I would use it, so I'm just gonna decant that into a smaller container. All right, so a 1/2 cup of olive oil. Now, I definitely would not use less than a 1/2 cup. I have used less in the past, and the first 2 or 3 times I've made this, I did not really care for it. It was just so acidic, so tomatoey. And so the fat from the olive oil really helps balance out the acidity. Toss your tomatoes in the olive oil, and then you're going to take an 8-ounce block of feta, block, not crumbled, and coat it in some of the oil that the tomatoes are in. That's just gonna help it get golden versus, I don't know if it's gonna dry out or burn. Now, these next 2 ingredients are optional. I just wanted to add them. I've seen some recipes have you add them. The recipe I'm working off of did not have you add them, but I'm using some red onion. Now, I've seen recipes call for shallots. You could use a yellow onion. I was just trying it out with the red onion and it was delicious. So I would say use a small red onion. I'm going to cut it into maybe 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch squares, chunks, small chunks. And I'm going to put that in with the tomatoes and cheese. We want it small enough to cook in the time that the tomatoes and the cheese are going to be in for, which is 35 minutes or so. So add in your onion, your shallot, whatever you decide to use or not use, and go ahead and give that a mix with the tomatoes. I should have done this before adding the cheese, but that's okay. There's lots of oil in here. You want to get the onions coated with oil too, again, to get them a little roasty. Roasting that nice golden color means flavor. So the second ingredient I'm going to be adding is a few cloves of garlic. So you can add more or less. Again, I should have added these with the tomatoes and the oil to get them coated. So I just pressed the garlic cloves down in between some tomatoes so that they get some oil on them. Again, to get nice and golden and roasty so they don't burn. And the end result of this recipe, it wasn't super garlicky. So I don't know if the garlic made a huge difference, but then again, if I hadn't put the garlic in, would I have noticed? That's the question. So I'm going to add some salt and some pepper. Your cheese is salty already, but the tomatoes, the onions, they need some salt and a little bit of pepper. You can also add that when you mix up your tomatoes before you put your block of cheese in there. Now it's time to pop our tomato mixture into the oven for 35 minutes or until the tomatoes burst and your cheese melts. Now, feta cheese doesn't exactly melt. It will loosen up and it will melt when we give it a stir. It'll, quote, melt down, but it's not going to melt into a puddle like most cheeses you would think of. In the meantime, I'm going to put a medium saucepan full of water on the stove over some heat so that when I'm ready, when there's maybe 10 minutes left of my tomatoes to roast, I will start my pasta cooking. Also, in the meantime, I'm going to chop up a packed 1/4 cup of basil leaves. So take your basil leaves, pack them into a 1/4 cup, and then chop them. That's how I did it, at least. Next, we can go ahead and set aside our chopped basil. And now I'm using rigatoni. I like the nice big tubed pasta. You really can use whatever shape pasta you want, but we need 8 ounces. So whenever you're ready, when your pasta water is boiling, be sure to salt your pasta water. And then we're going to add in a ½ pound or 8 ounces of dry pasta. Then once your tomatoes have roasted and you'll be able to see that their skin has split, it's time to take your baking dish out of the oven. Now the recipe that I'm working off of has us adding minced garlic at this point along with our chopped basil. So the recipe I'm working off of did not have you add in the garlic cloves before you roast this, but that is also because I'm doing something that most of the feta pasta or baked feta pasta recipes don't have you do. So they don't normally have you having big chunks of onion like I do, and they don't have you adding whole cloves of garlic for the roast. But at this point, most recipes have you take like a wooden spoon or whatever kind of utensil and smash all of your tomatoes. I personally don't like tomato chunks in a sauce. So what I do is I just mix it up, make sure my cheese is all broken up. I might smush some of my tomatoes. I've added in my basil, and I'm gonna get out my immersion blender. Now, I understand not everyone has an immersion blender. You could use your regular blender. If you are someone who has neither a blender nor an immersion blender, and you want to add onion, you're going to want to dice your onion a lot smaller than I did. And you probably want to mince your garlic, just so that you don't have these massive chunks of onion and big cloves of garlic in your final dish. But for everyone else, I'm going to go ahead and blend up my sauce. It's going to go from kind of creamy white sauce with the big pops of red in there. Yeah, we're turning this into an orange sauce. I don't know, does it? It kind of reminds me of a penne vodka sauce, except a penne vodka sauce is a lot more red. This is quite an orange sauce, so I don't know if that's a turnoff for you or whatnot, but trust the process. Once your sauce is smooth, or as smooth as you want it to be, it's time to add our pasta, but my pasta needed a few more minutes, so I'm going to take a few more basil leaves and chop those up to add as a garnish on top. Now, you can probably see that I have some brown spots on my basil leaves. That's just what I had to work with. I went to Aldi yesterday. This was the best bunch they had. It didn't look like it had this many brown spots when I picked up the package, but you know what? It tasted just fine. Definitely use fresh basil if you can. It's such a game changer. Dried basil just is not going to give you the same flavor. You can try it and it will do a little work, but fresh for this one for sure. So once your pasta is done, you can go ahead and drain it. The recipe I worked off of said you can retain a ½ cup of the pasta water, and that might be just to thin out your sauce a little bit, but I am just adding my pasta right from my saucepan. I drained out a little bit of water, but I have a slotted spoon that I'm using to transfer it all over. There is an easier way, but I took the hard way today. Now, I have heard that pasta water has the starch from the pasta, so it helps the pasta sauce stick to the pasta. Now, is that still the same with a dried pasta? I feel like that's super relevant for fresh pasta, but does it work as well when you're using dried pasta? Questions, leave me a comment. Once you have all of your pasta into your sauce, give it a toss. I understand it kind of looks like Kraft mac and cheese right now, but I promise you it doesn't taste like that. It tastes like a grown-up, sophisticated pasta dish, which is what we're going for. But how easy is that? You just toss everything, you chop a couple things, you toss everything into a pan in some oil, you roast it, you make some pasta, you blend it, put it all together, garnish with some freshly chopped basil. There you have it. Easy dinner. You could absolutely serve this with a side salad. I think that would balance out the rich, creamy heartiness of this pasta dish. But I will leave the ingredients and the instructions on how I made this down below for you guys to check out. But before you go, I'm going to do a quick taste test. And let you know that this does well for leftovers. Your sauce is definitely going to thicken up. So my sauce looks quite thin right now, but your leftovers, it's definitely going to thicken. It's going to thicken also as it cools. Not only does it kind of look like Big Kid Kraft mac and cheese, but if you're someone who ate their Kraft mac and cheese by putting noodles on each prong of the fork, hit that like button. Or if you think this recipe looks delicious, hit that like button. Definitely taste this before you serve it. Mine needed a little bit more salt, just a smidge, and just the tiniest bit of black pepper. And that was the cherry on top. Be sure to subscribe for more delicious recipes. And if you're looking for another delicious pasta dish, go ahead and click here right on screen, and I will see you guys there.